By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. Better than food, man. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always. Hope you're doing well. Happy October, happy fall. All right, get that coffee. Oh, God, that's good. From China, from the Yunnan province. It's absolutely amazing, delicious. If you are kind enough to donate $5 or more per video to the show on Patreon and get entered into the Book and Coffee Jar, those who win this October's Book and Coffee Jar drawing shall be getting a bag of this, which is, I kid you not, one of the best coffees, maybe the best coffee I've ever tasted, period. Also, I'm selling these bookmarks. Just has my face on it with a little reminder there. I don't have a website up yet. You can just hit me up using the email below or DM me on Instagram and let me know how many you'd like. And they're $4 each plus shipping, which is pretty cheap in the US and not much more if you're outside. But I'm happy to send a quote for international, and I'm happy to sign them, of course. Or not. I'll write whatever you want. Thank you so much. But first, today's video is sponsored by the Ridge Wallet, specifically this new Forged Ember model. These things are awesome. They are light, sleek, industrial, and this one in particular is just a little bit sinister, which I appreciate very much. It's got these shiny flecks of red in there. It's pretty awesome. And on the back too. Holds up to 12 cards plus room for cash on the back. These do not go in your back pocket. These are actually meant to go into your front pocket or wherever you like. You know, you can just slip it right there. Whoop, voila. The durable material means that each wallet comes with a lifetime warranty. You can buy this one wallet and carry it for life. In fact, the Ridge team is so confident you'll enjoy it that they'll let you test drive it for 45 days. You can send it back for a full refund if you don't love it. So it's pretty risk-free. But if that didn't convince you, please check out their 40,000 five-star reviews. 40,000. Also, for all you folks who like to write in longhand, they have these awesome pens. This is a bolt action pen in gunmetal. I like this thing. but you know, I kind of like guns. Yeah, you have this great pen, right? But where you press the thing to go down, it's like a rifle. I don't know if you can see it properly. It's really cool. It's very, very sturdy. Really nice pen. Very good. Nice for everyday carry. Yeah, and it snaps back like a rifle. I find that very amusing. So yeah, if you're a writer looking for a nice pen, something that can really go to war, then look no further. Get 10% off your order today with free worldwide shipping and returns by going to ridge.com/betterthanfood and using the discount code betterthanfood. The link is below. Thank you very much. Well, here it is, finally, one of the perfect books for October. I've been wanting to read this one for years, and I'm very happy to say I finally finished Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. You like my little pumpkin here? Yeah. It's festive. Get in the mood, man. I actually hadn't read a single title from Ray Bradbury, who was the very famous American author who wrote Fahrenheit 451. And I don't really have any interest in reading that either, but I definitely had an interest in reading this. I was in kind of a mood for some sort of classic folkloric horror for the season. This definitely scratches the itch. It has all the American Midwestern Gothic atmosphere one could hope for. It's like Steinbeck was going through an H.P. Lovecraft phase. This guy influenced Stephen King, Clive Barker, Neil Gaiman, Margaret Atwood, none of whom I care for actually, but you may. Well, Barker may be good, but I still have yet to read The Hellbound Heart. That's been on the list for a while. This particular version actually has some pieces from Stephen King and Margaret Atwood. Ray Bradbury is an author who was born in Illinois. This makes a lot of sense when you read the book. It has a very Midwestern sensibility, but he moved out to LA later on in life and became a household name, at least over here stateside. He was a very successful, very well-known author, and he passed away a few years back in 2012. He really had quite a genre spectrum as far as his writing goes. According to Wikipedia, he wrote fantasy, science fiction, horror fiction, magical realism, and mystery fiction. Indeed. He also wrote one called, I think it was a short story, but it might have been a novel, I'm not sure, called The Halloween Tree, which was a favorite of mine. There was a Cartoon Network before they became kind of punk in the 90s when they were kind of still playing it safe. They did an adaptation of The Halloween Tree, an animated adaptation, and that's a story that was written by Ray Bradbury. And I loved the cartoon when I was a kid. I'd never read the book, but I should. So some interesting things happened to Ray Bradbury when he was young. One of them was that he went and saw this circus entertainer named Mr. Electrico. And Mr. Electrico like touched a wand or like a sword to his nose to make his hair stand up. It would make the patrons their hair stand up. And he yelled at Ray Bradbury, "Live forever," as a kid. And apparently Bradbury wrote every day of his life since then. It's interesting. It's a good story. Later, Mr. Electrico, I think, also showed him around the freak show of this circus And he also informed Bradbury that he believed that the soul of his dead friend who died in World War I was inside him. That's one way to make an impression on a kid, I suppose, and it did. In fact, there's a character in this book, in an homage to him, named Mr. Electrico. A couple more things I want to talk about before we get into the book. Some really interesting, backstory to Bradbury. Bradbury was related to one of the women who were accused of witchcraft during the Salem witch trials, Mary Bradbury. Her execution was put off long enough for the whole thing, the whole trend of paranoia to die out, I think, so she wasn't executed. And Bradbury was also related to a Shakespeare scholar named Douglas Spalding. And that's where the book gets its title. The book's title comes from Macbeth, which I haven't read, but I know it's a scene with the witches, double, double, toil and trouble. It's right before Macbeth begins speaking to them. When he enters the scene, one of these witches stops and senses Macbeth on his way. She says, "By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes." Excellent title for a book. There's also a witch in this book. Magic and witchcraft are themes in Bradbury's life and writing. Yeah, I mean, with that kind of history, they're sort of inseparable, no? This is also a weird piece of trivia, because Bradbury moved out to LA, and so he knew so many famous Hollywood people, and one of them, who he was very good friends with, was a guy named Ray Harryhausen. If any of you know that name, I've known who that was since I was a kid. Ray Harryhausen was a stop-motion animator, and he's the one who did all of that stunning animation in like the 1950s films like Jason and the Argonauts. I think he did Mighty Joe Young, the original Clash of the Titans, The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, all kinds of stuff. He was amazing. So him and Bradbury were big fans of King Kong, which the original King Kong, 1933, which I was too. When I was a kid, that was my favorite film. When I was 4 years old, I saw that, and that changed my whole shit. I wanted to make films after that. Absolutely obsessed with King Kong. And to this day, I think it's one of the most incredible films ever made. So I guess this could be described as a Midwest Gothic horror story that takes place in an unknown small town somewhere in America in the middle of the 20th century, probably the 50s. And this carnival arrives by locomotive at 3 a.m. in this town, the hour when people are most likely to die, as the book puts it. Turns out that's actually 11 a.m. Not nearly as dramatic, but interesting as useless trivia. So Will Halloway and Jim Nightshade are two best buddies. They're I think, 13 going on 14 or something. And they were born within 1 minute of each other or something. One before midnight, the other after midnight. The one after would be Nightshade, naturally. They live next door to one another. Jim's father is MIA, and he's raised by a single mom. I think it's alluded to that he's dead, but I'm not sure. Will's folks are together, and his father, Charles, is the janitor at the local library, where he goes most nights, it seems, to reflect on aging and death. He's 54, so he's starting to feel, old. He had Will later in life, so he's feeling like, he doesn't have the energy or something, to be good enough as a father. He's depressed at feeling too old and sort of having missed out on life, and he's seeing, his son grow up and all the, the youthful energy and all that. So it seems he has a real fear and sadness at getting older and having sort of missed out on life, it seems, or just not had enough of it, basically. The arrival of this carnival, Cougar and Dark's pandemonium show, headed by one Mr. Dark, kind of agitates all these existential themes that he's wrestling with. The carnival feeds on people's sadness. The carnival contains a freak show and a strange house of mirrors and a kind of creepy calliope that plays Chopin's funeral march backwards, and a carousel, a special carousel, that happens to age or rejuvenate those who ride on it. It can either go, forwards or backwards, 1 year at a time for each full rotation of the wheel. Rejuvenate is not really the right word, and this is really interesting. I can't find a word that is exact, the exact definition is to make younger, because the concept just doesn't really exist. Time is a one-way street, and we don't really have the proper language to communicate the opposite, because it just doesn't happen. And that's the tragedy that concerns the book. The inevitable, merciless passage of time. That part is beautiful. That's really great. The strongest part of the book is Charles Halloway's meditation on aging, death, and evil. In fact, at some points, he seems to be more of a protagonist than his son, who I think the boys are actually the real protagonists. But it's interesting because he's the one who actually really changes. Yeah, it's a little confusing. While the description of the train rolling into town in the middle of the night is great, like the speed of the train causing the icy rain to go sluicing through the calliope and playing this eerie, chaotic music as the locomotive is cutting across the nocturnal landscape. It's great. But while that's great, the best known passage is the greatest in the book. And it comes after Will's dad, Charles, has been looking through old newspaper articles at the library, trying to dig up anything on this carnival. And it turns out it's come through town, but only once every few decades, which would of course be impossible for it to be the same one because normally people die. But Mr. Cougar and Mr. Dark do not. So what's going on there? But he can see it in the archives, and he can see these dates going back a long ways. But the carnival waits, for large swaths of time in between so people forget. Its proprietors, after all, especially Mr. Dark, possess a kind of sick artificial immortality. They just ride the carousel. So his father is looking through these old newspaper articles and he puts this together. And he remembers this old religious tract from a pastor that he knew. The Autumn People is what it's talking about, and it turns out his father has committed it to memory. So he tells it to his son. He says, an old religious tract, Pastor Newgate Phillips, I think. Read it as a boy. How does it go again? He tried to remember. He licked his lips. He did remember. For some, autumn comes early, stays late through life where October follows September and November touches October, and then instead of December and Christ's birth, there is no Bethlehem star, no rejoicing. But September comes again, and old October, and so on down the years, with no winter, spring, or revivifying summer. For these beings, fall is the ever-normal season, the only weather, there be no choice beyond. Where do they come from? The dust. Where do they go? The grave. Does blood stir their veins? No. The night wind. What ticks in their head? The worm. What speaks from their mouth? The toad. What sees from their eye? The snake. What hears with their ear? The abyss between the stars. They sift the human storm for souls, eat flesh of reason, fill tombs with sinners. They frenzy forth. In gusts they beetle scurry, creep, thread, filter, motion, make all moons sullen, and surely cloud all clear run waters. The spiderweb hears them, trembles, breaks. Such are the Autumn People. Beware of them. Such are the Autumn People. Beware of them. It's great, right? Great passage, great writing, excellent writing. Something Wicked This Way Comes was published in 1962, and there's a decent film adaptation made by Disney in the 80s with Sir Jonathan Pryce as Mr. Dark, also known as the Illustrated Man because he is tattooed from head to toe with various, fierce creatures and so on. That did not make it into the film, interestingly. Probably just too complicated or weird for Disney. You see, this is nearly a children's book, but there are passages in here that are more adult than most fiction that is marketed to adults now. Because the horror in the book is actually a metaphor about, at its deep, dark heart, aging, death, and evil. You see, the Disney film is not that great. Bradbury said about the film adaptation, it was not a great film, no, but a decently nice one. It's just like the most diplomatic way of saying that shit sucked. I would recommend just watching the scene that I've linked to below. It's the best scene of the film with Sir Jonathan Pryce ripping out the pages of the book. To be fair, that does not happen in the novel. There's a similar dialogue back and forth. That scene with him ripping the pages out, there is no book that Mr. Dark is ripping in the novel. That scene is actually better in the film. Everything else is better in the novel, but that scene is actually better in the film, and that's the best scene of the film. You see, Disney was actually not the first to try and get this film made. And there was actually another director you might have heard of, who was originally attached on the film. I admit, I was surprised by this because I had just seen a clip from an interview with him talking about being a good whore versus a bad whore as far as being a director in Hollywood. Sam motherfucking Peckinpah. Ray Bradbury asked him, Sam, how would you do it? How would you adapt the film? And Peckinpah said, I'm gonna rip the pages out of the book and stuff them in the camera. Which is his way of saying, it'll be true to the material. For those of you who don't know about Sam Peckinpah, I highly suggest you go and check him out. What would they call him today? They would call him problematic. Some of his films are fantastic. Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia? Dude, excellent film. Amazing film. With Warren Oates in a white suit in Mexico carrying around a severed head. Possibly one of the best things I've ever seen. It's just a great film. It's a rough one, don't get me wrong, but it's, oh, yeah. Great film. The ending is great. It's a real tragedy that we didn't get the Peckinpah version. But then there are countless tragedies of films that never got made. There ought to be a graveyard of brilliant ideas in Hollywood. But it gets worse. I learned that there was a score made by Georges Delerue, who scored Godard's Contempt. Most beautiful film scores, soundtracks ever. I mean, right up there with like Bernard Herrmann, you know, like Hitchcock, Psycho, Vertigo, Scorsese, Taxi Driver, Bernard Herrmann. Amazing, amazing, amazing composer. Delerue also is incredible. And Disney decided it was too dark, and they never used it. Criminals. The guillotine is too good for these people, my friends. They must be tarred and feathered, put on the rack, and drawn and quartered minimum. But then it was released a few years back, in 2015, I think. You can go listen to it, and I've linked to it below. It's terrific. Naturally, it's phenomenal. Gave me goosebumps immediately. That intro music, right? Just like, you know, you just picture like the locomotive at night, traveling across the landscape. Dun 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 dun. What does that look like? This is all to say that, you know, it's been a highly influential book, and Something Wicked This Way Comes is not just a book for children. The history of the book's creation is actually really interesting. Bradbury had this idea for a book. Then he met Gene Kelly, like Singing in the Rain Gene Kelly. This was in the 50s. And so Bradbury befriended Kelly, and he pitched him this idea for a film. He wrote a screenplay based on this initial idea, which eventually became this book. And Kelly loved it. And he went to Europe to try to get the film financed, and it didn't happen. Didn't come through. He tried, but didn't happen. Gene Kelly could not get funding for a film written by Ray Bradbury. Hollywood, man. So Bradbury decided to write the novel, then years later get it published. It gets published years later, like 6 or 7, I think. Then more years later, it gets turned into a film, again. Except for the first time, this time. Bradbury considered himself a screenwriter, and he was a really sharp guy. He had a great quote. I love this. It's from an interview with the Paris Review, I think. He said, "You can't learn to write in college. It's a very bad place for writers because the teachers always think they know more than you do, and they don't." What is so compelling about Bradbury, you know, in his self-identification as a screenwriter, ends up, unfortunately for me, being the downfall of this book. Because as soon as we get to Act 2, you have this terrific start. You have this amazing setup, just atmospheric, Steinbeck again flavor thing, and like the dread, the Lovecraftian dread, and like, you know, there's like weird stuff going on about the town. What's happening? This carnival comes into town. And as soon as you get to Act 2, it's just awful. If you're a film person, you'll understand there's Act 1, you know, the inciting incident, which brings us to Act 2 and, you know, ever-increasing conflict. And then we have the climax, and then, you know, Act 3, resolution, all that. But the issue with this is that too much of the novel reads like a bad screenplay. And I feel like that's probably where most screenplays fall the fuck apart, is in Act 2, which is the bulk of the film. It's just not good. It reads like a Disney film or like a video game. These kids like just fighting increasingly demonic entities or characters, but it's not really that interesting at all. It's just kind of action-y entertainment, pap, garbage. Look, much as I wanted to enjoy it, and I did, the second act just turns into what one would expect would be an 80s film produced by Disney. That's what it turns into. The compelling philosophical exploration just gives away, just falls apart into this kind of clunky and less imaginative than expected, less than you would initially have been led to believe, stale, repetitive, and tired adventure story about the, you know, the eternal fight of good versus evil by an American boy, his best friend, and his dad. God, fucking shoot me. I mean, it's kind of like Bradbury realized how dark he could have gone, but didn't. Which is interesting. It's probably a testament to his character, I'm not sure. And the result is a cop-out, because he couldn't wrestle with the concepts that he was sort of staring at from behind his eyes, like covering his eyes, but like peering at from afar, as if watching a horrifying film, but that film is life. But he couldn't look it right in the face. There's just this kind of hollow American sentimentality that's like designed to move crowds, but it's actually meaningless and trivial when examined closer. Feels like low-hanging fruit, for sure. So I don't mean to be too harsh. Because there are excellent passages in this book. There are just phenomenal pieces in this book, atmosphere-wise, writing-wise. He was very talented and really capable, which is what's so disappointing, because he really could have made this like legendary. And it is for some people. Some people really, really love this book, it seems. It's like dying embers in a fire. There are some red hot coals, which are just like excellent. But they're few and far between. You gotta sift through a lot of crap. So, it's unfortunate. Not a lot, you know, because it's a fast read. I mean, there are some of you out there who could probably blow through this in a weekend. And yeah, if you have like a couple of drinks and you just like sit down at night by a fire to read Something Wicked This Way Comes, I don't think you're gonna like regret your time spent there, you know, for sure. Especially during, you know, this season, during Halloween, I don't think you're gonna regret doing that. But it's not better than food, no. No, some passages are. Some passages are. It wasn't enough of the book to tip the scale for me. Wish it was. I really do. There are some compelling moments, no doubt. I mean, the scene where Mr. Dark is looking for the boys and he has their faces illustrated on his palms, one on each hand, and he squeezes them with his nails and they start bleeding, you know, and falls on the kids who are hiding in the street gutter below, looking up at him, trying to hide from him and the freaks who are searching for them in the town. It's creepy. Yeah, it's weird. It's odd. It's darker than a kid's book, you know, but it's sort of also for kids. I don't know. Kids may have been tougher at that time, you know, like, but yeah, it really just goes south, unfortunately. I mean, he just didn't know what to do with it, you know? I think he was just working on it too long. This is what happens. So better than food? Yes, but only the first 50 pages. Just that part is one of the best Halloween reads I could recommend. Make sure you flip to page 176 as well for the history of the autumn people, as I read. That's also good. There's some okay stuff near the end as well. But the real magic of the book, I think, is probably in the first third or so. It really devolves quickly, and that's a shame. So you should read this. Anybody who is a fan of Todd Browning's Freaks, definitely. Anybody who loves like the old, creepy, traveling carnival circus stuff. William Lindsay Gresham's Nightmare Alley, most definitely. Great book. Nick Tosches, who was a fan of all that stuff, who was a fan of, you know, carnivals and freak shows and all that. 1950s dark rockabilly shit. Anybody who enjoys like kind of like a, you know, pessimistic philosophical meditation along with their quintessentially American horror stories, a la Thomas Ligotti. Although this doesn't really smack of pessimism, more of just a kind of fantasy and realism with kind of an optimistic note at the end. Kind of like a, you know, we must imagine Sisyphus is happy sort of thing. Like, you know, if any of you have read Camus. If Halloween is your thing, it's just about as pure Halloween atmosphere as you can get. And it also has additional writings from Stephen King and Margaret Atwood. I highly suggest you check it out. There's some cool behind the scenes, behind the book stuff at the end. So, cool? Cool. Oh, delicious. Coffee time. For those of you who are new, I take all of the names of the patrons on Patreon who have donated $5 or more per video to the show. I place their names in this mason jar, and for every review I pull out, I send them a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, plus a bag of coffee, roasted by yours truly. And the coffee is delicious, and this is one of the greatest I've ever had. And those who win the October coffee jar drawing shall be getting it. It is from the Yunnan province in China. It might actually be the greatest cup of coffee I've ever had. And I roasted it. I'm so proud of myself. Very limited supply of that. But if you would like to get in on that, you can go to patreon.com/booksarebetterthanfood and donate $5 or more per video to the show. Those who donate $1 or more will also get many things. They are listed below if you want to check them out. If you like the show, I think you will enjoy them. Unfortunately, international shipping is not included. Sorry about that. And I'm going to be releasing a very special racy review this Halloween season. You're not going to want to miss this, but it's not for those who are easily offended. But I think those of you who enjoy the show will enjoy it. Best of luck to all the patrons, and thank you so much. And happy Halloween. All right, here we go. You have to listen to that soundtrack too. That one by George Delarue. It's just so epic. It's such a tragedy they didn't make that. Alex S. Thank you very much, Alex. I sincerely appreciate it. You're going to receive Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury, plus some delicious coffee from China. And I hope you love it as much as I do, because I really love that stuff. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this. I'd really appreciate it. Please share this video with folks who you think would enjoy this book. And always remember this Halloween season, bring a book wherever you go. You never know when you'll have 5 or 10 minutes that would probably just be sucked away by your phone, sucked into the vortex of social media, lost forever in the annals of time, that could instead be used to read a good story by Ray Bradbury, or whoever. Doesn't matter. Anything's better than looking at your phone. All right, happy Halloween. Take care of yourselves. Have a great night. Talk to you soon. Ciao.